Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the lab series, long overdue. We used to do these all the time. We don't do them so much anymore, and I think that we should change that. I think we should get back into doing these. What these are meant to be are kind of deep dive, mostly technical explainer videos so that kind of engineering folks and technical folks at an ISV can sort of understand how to use a feature in depth. I'm Jeff from BlockChyp. Today we're going to be covering the payment link system. So this basically is the ability to email an invoice to somebody or text them if you have a way to do that. And then they can go online and kind of a hosted payment page and pay for something. It can also be used to enroll a payment method in some kind of recurring payment system as well. We built this in March 2020 during the height of COVID to kind of help some of our merchants, adapt to the changing circumstances. And since then, it's been used a lot more and more. And this last couple of weeks, we've done some major enhancements to it. So mostly around the ability to resend links to kind of send reminder emails, and the ability to get better error handling and more visibility into, say, a payment link sort of transaction history. Because the ideal scenario is you send a payment link one time and they click the invoice and they pay it and that's it. But there could be errors, there could be declines, there could be all kinds of stuff. And so we've given you better tools to look at all that. So we'll start with I'm using the command line interface today. We'll start with a very simple example. Everything I'm showing you here in the CLI can also be done with any of the SDKs that you happen to be using, right? So the most primitive way that you can invoke the payment link system is you pass in the send link command to the CLI. You pass in an amount, you pass the email you want the link to go to. You can pass auto send as a flag, which means we will send the email for you, and you pass in order ref. Now, if you don't want us to send the email, if you've got some kind of special format you want to use, that's okay too. You just leave that auto send flag off. So I'll click this, I'll run that, we'll see what happens. Here's what we get. We get a couple of things. The main thing we get that we care about is this URL. So this is the URL that would take you to the hosted invoice or hosted payment page. If you want to display a QR code, you can do that. The QR code can be accessed right here. And all it does is encode this link for you if you don't have any easy way to do that yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this link in my browser so you can see what we see. See? Very, very simple. In this case, there's no line item data, so there's not much here. So if I want to pay this, I would just put in some, this is a test merchant, so I don't need anything specific. Tom Hanks today. Okay, we're going to pay it, and it's done. And that's kind of the happy path, right? So the merchant would have gotten an email that they've received the payment, and all is well. So what if I want to check the status of this link? So what I could do, we now have a payment status link API, so I'll invoke that. Payment link status. You only need to pass in one thing, and that's the link code. So I'm going to pass in the link code, and that's this value right here, and poof. So you can see that's a lot of information, right? But in essence, what it's showing me is that it's been approved, and it gives me the transaction details. You can see that right here. So it shows the transaction associated with this that actually was used to receive payment. There's also a transaction history section. What I might do is clean this up and make this look a bit, I'll go over and use a tool so you guys can see what it looks like if it's pretty, right? All right. I don't think we got everything, hang on. Okay. Okay, that's easier to see. So you can see that you've got the status is now paid, and it shows the last transaction. So it shows that it succeeded, the transaction ID, all the normal stuff you'd expect to see in a BlockChyp authorization response. And so And then you, of course, see the transaction history. So this will come into play later when we're dealing with, more error-prone scenarios. Let's try a slightly more advanced example. So you notice in the invoice that I showed you before, it was really, really basic. There was not much there. But you can actually do a lot. So, for example, you can pass in line item level data. So I'll go ahead and do an example of that. We have this kind of pre-baked, so you don't have to sit here and watch me type for 5 minutes. But you can pass in sort of line item level data on the invoice. And so I'll go ahead and type my email address, and we'll send it. So now you can see I'll take this and I'll paste it here. And now you can see I have some line item level data, and you can pass in this kind of information. And for those of you who are already kind of familiar with our line item system on terminals, it's the exact same data model. So whatever you're doing for line item level data on the terminals will work here as well. So there's also a resend API. I'm just going to pop up to this payment link status one. Let's say some time has gone by and you want to give this this person a nudge without necessarily starting a new link from scratch. You can do that. There is a resend link command. It's not going to work in this case because this link's already been used. But that's how it works. So the rules around this is that it can only be done once per hour. So you can't just spam somebody with reminders. It will only allow you to do this once per hour. So you'll get kind of a rate limit exception if you do this more than once an hour. You can also, let's do another, let's go ahead and send another payment link we'll do a duplicate so we have something to test with. And see, there's the link code. You can also cancel a link. Let's say that a payment link, like maybe they paid another way, or maybe, you've had, seller's remorse and you want to change something. So there is also we can have a different link code here. So I'll change this to cancel link. And the link code will be this one. Right. There you go, canceled. So now what I'm going to do, the link's been canceled. I'm going to try to access it. So I'm going to grab the payment link here, the URL, and I'll paste it in my handy dandy browser. Oh, I'm not trying to search, I'm trying to do something else. Here we go. Right, and it says payment link is invalid, right? So you get kind of an error. It'll show you the invoice, but it will tell you basically you'll get an error. So that's kind of how it works. Okay, let's try another example. So in certain circumstances that you may want to have some contract language. Maybe there's an agreement associated with this link. We see that happen sometimes with health club memberships, that kind of thing. So you can pass in TC content. That's for terms and conditions content. And it can be, here's a contract. And let's do TC name for contract name. Okay. And this content can be a lot. Like it doesn't have to, in a real situation, it would not be some short little phrase. It could be a big giant block of text. So I'll grab the URL here and I'll paste it in my browser. And you can see that down here, like when you're using those, when you're using that language, you get kind of contract language here, and then they have to actually click to agree, and then after they pay. So that's basically how that works. So let's use this as an example to do some to test some errors, so you can see transaction history. It's great if things just work, but sometimes they don't. So I've got a couple of test cards here that we can use to simulate unusual conditions. We'll start with a decline test card. So that's what this is. So those of you who have a set of our test cards, you should have one of these in your kit. So I'll go ahead and type in the decline test card number. Okay, that's the test card number if you want it. These are also available in our documentation if you don't have a test card kit. Maybe Tom Hanks again. So you see it's declined, right? Okay, well, what if I want to try again? I don't like the fact that it's declined. Let's try a different test card. This time, let's use a timeout test card. That's what this one is, right? So this one is used to simulate timeouts. So one of the things that we try to do at BlockChyp is that, we're all, we used to do your jobs at the ISVs and try to integrate these payment systems with our products. And so there were just certain things that were hard to do, right? Like one of them was to simulate errors. You can't just program for the happy path. You have to think about all the things that could go wrong. So that was an error. Let's do a timeout. So this will simulate. Hang on, I got to restart here. So I will enter a special card that is used to simulate a transaction timeout. I think I can leave everything else the way it is for the purposes of testing. Okay, so obviously it's going to take a second. We're waiting, as we should. It simulates a 30-second timeout. That's what it does. Now, obviously, none of these test cards work if you're using a live merchant account. These are for testing only. Still processing, still going. All right, simulated timeout, so you can see what happened. So it didn't work. Okay, there's also a special situation that's available in this scenario. If you're familiar with timeout reversals, a timeout reversal is when you submit a transaction and you're not sure what happened. Maybe it made it to but all you know is that it timed out. You did not get a response. It doesn't mean the transaction was processed. It either means the transaction never made it to our gateway, or maybe it made it to the gateway, but the response didn't come back. You're not really sure which. And that's why you do a transaction timeout. So there is a way to simulate so what that just did is it simulated the kind of like a real timeout. But there's also a special hack you can use to simulate a situation where the transaction made it to the gateway. We processed it, we recorded it, but you didn't get a response back. You can simulate that condition using a special CVV code, which designed from the 90s is 187. So now I'm going to enter a valid card number. This is a real card number that's going to work. And we used kind of the universal test card number here, 411. Okay, and then just use the CVV code 187. So this is going to simulate a timeout, but with the special condition of the transaction did make it to the gateway, it processed, we just didn't get the response back. We're simulating that exact condition. So we'll give that we'll let that go for a second, and then we'll do a real transaction and then show you how you can use the status APIs to sort of sift through all this history. 30 seconds goes by slowly when you're waiting, isn't it? Almost done though. Okay, there we go. So that simulated the condition. So now what I'll do is I'll just change the CVV code to something valid. We'll click it, and it works. That time it works fine. Okay, so now what we would do is let's go back to looking at the payment link status, but we'll use the link code from the previous request, the one that we were just messing with, because we had so many attempts, right? There were declines, there were timeouts, there were errors. You need an API that allows you to sort of sift through all of that to figure out what happened. And so that's what these new APIs do. So I'll paste this in here. Okay, it's going to give us a big pile of JSON back as a response. It's going to be tough to sift through all of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it into my JSON formatter so that we can look at it in a more holistic way. Okay, so this is basically the API where I look up the status of a payment link. Has it been touched yet? What's gone on? So I can see the last transaction that was processed. It succeeded. It was approved. That's good. This is meant to be a quick, I don't really care about all the history. Is this good or bad? Tell me. That's what it tells you. Now, if you go into transaction history, you're going to see a lot of things. It's going to be the most recent transaction first. So that's going to be the good transaction that worked. So you see approved is true. Then we'll go down. And here's one where we got a code 187 error. Did not work. And we see another. So now we see a reversal. So this is a transaction you didn't ask for. So the payment link system will auto reverse do an automatic timeout reversal on transactions that sort of misbehaved. So that's what you're seeing here, is you're seeing sort of the reversal history as well, right? And so anytime if we do an auto reversal, you'll see that here. All that will be here. So this is a really good way to sort of improve your visibility into payment links. So that's pretty good. One more thing I would touch on, just as a best practice, right? So some of you who use payment links already are familiar with the webhook aspect of things. So you have the ability let me go back to the command line. So when you invoke a payment link request, and let's do a real simple one here, you can actually pass in a webhook URL that essentially gets notified whenever someone touches that transaction. Now, this is a good way to get instant notification when there's some activity, but you should not use it as kind of like the sort of source of truth. My recommendation is always, whenever you're trying to integrate payment links with your system and you're trying to check status, the webhook can basically be a thing. Oh, something happened, and rather than waiting for my normal polling schedule, I can go ahead and check this now. So I think it's totally fine to use webhooks to improve the user experience, but it shouldn't be your sole method of determining if the transaction went through or not. You really should have some kind of a process in the background that goes in and checks, uses this new payment link status API and checks those things periodically. So I would definitely do that if you want to. And we didn't touch on this before in detail, so I'll just kind of cover it again, because pay by QR code is all the rage, and there's a lot of mystery around what a QR code is. But a QR code is really just a link to something. It's just a link that's modern cell phone cameras recognize it as a link, and they just open it up in a browser or an application, depending on the link itself. And so we have that. And so if you would rather deal with these payment links as QR codes, you can. You can actually, there is a special flag where you can actually we can actually render the QR code for you, and it comes down in a binary format. It'll be as hexadecimal, and you can basically throw that into a buffer and render it. Or you can just, more often than not, you would just use this link. So the QR code URL, if you paste this in a browser, you'll get a QR code. So you can take this and kind of do with as you see fit. So that's the payment link system. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to support. And I'd love some suggestions on technical topics that we should dive into next time. So please reach out with those. And thank you for joining us on the Lab series.